critical thinking. And asked to do this presentation about critical thinking, my first thought is just how little room there is in our society for critical thinking anymore. I wonder sometimes if the moderate voice, while it might be 50, 60, 70, 80% of us, really doesn't have a voice to be heard in our society. I know when you watch the news, there's no room for the middle. I know when you make your election choices, there's very rarely a moderate candidate. Instead, it's about adding up the numbers to see which extreme choice you're going to make. I do feel like we are bombarded with opinions, and because there is no room for anybody to be moderate anymore, we no longer have cause for a voice that really takes logic into account when we make our decisions. So I would ask you, what do you want to believe? Um, I suppose if there's an answer to that question, you really have to wonder if you're being logical. Because what you want to believe, should that play a role? Should that play a factor? So many times we choose our news stations based on what we want to believe. We believe our team heading into the season is going to be successful because it's desperately what we want to believe. And we believe the opponent is flawed because we need to believe that to have hope. But does it really play into a logical decision-making process? A critical thinker always makes sure to find these 7 things. The first is clarity. Before you have to believe what you may be hearing, you need to ask questions to make sure you understand the statement that is being made to you rather. Are there examples for this? So, Mr. News Pundit, what are you suggesting is the problem and what is the solution? How often would that news pundit really have an answer for the solution? Or is it simply the problem is the status quo and changing the status quo would be the solution with no specifics, no explanation, no examples? Accuracy. Consider what you know to be fact, not. Take nothing for granted. Think about the statement, is the world is flat. Well, first of all, that statement itself has become historically inaccurate. We didn't believe the world was flat nearly as long as I was taught we did. Certainly, Christopher Columbus didn't discover a round world. It was largely believed by everyone that the world was round. But at the same time, taken at face value, is the world flat, or the world is flat, rather, that statement is so fraught with inaccuracy that it makes everything that comes after irrelevant. Precision. Ask yourself, is the opinion being put out there specific enough to really be valuable? Sure, there can be an opinion, the world is round, but what does that mean? Is that, too far to drive in one day, dear? Is a question I've heard, from my wife. And in a snide response once, I asked her, is that, you mean too far for us to actually make it, or too far for us to actually tolerate going? The issue didn't go well for me, but obviously it has to do with whether or not we're really talking in terms of miles and hours, or are we talking in terms of emotions and personalities? Relevance. Does the statement being made really apply to what was being brought up? I always remember this famous news event. It was a debate back when I was a much younger man. Dan Quayle, and I cannot remember who he was debating in a vice presidential debate for the election. And Dan Quayle, who infamously said, compared his age to um, John Kennedy's age, was lambasted by his opponent, who asked back, you sir are no John F. Kennedy, blah blah blah. I wondered what could the response have been there, but certainly there's an illogic to his opponent's response, and he could have perhaps said, "No, I would never say that I wasn't, but at least we're the same age. Are you saying that age is not a factor?" Because that really was the argument he was being made. Depth. Now, it's easy to make comments on the perimeter or the periphery of an issue that are true and accurate, perhaps relevant, but do they go far enough into the issue to really make a point? Where I'm from in California, there's the very common anti-immigration philosophy that basically starts with the idea that if we blocked immigrants from California, there'd be more jobs for people from California. The statement goes something like this: those immigrants are taking our jobs. Um, I have to admit that having lived in California for almost over 40 years, I never met a single person who could say they lost a job to an immigrant. They lost a job to an illegal immigrant. They applied and they gave it to an illegal immigrant instead. It simply never was the case. But the point might be, statistically there are jobs that immigrants are having, but in reality they haven't gone into the depth of the issue enough to prove it. Breadth. Now, breadth goes beyond simply the depth of it, but you have to take a look at what that opponent is saying and say, did you consider that when you look at the other argument? What do your opponents think? Now, it's easy for the opposite perspective to just say, well, they think this and they're wrong. Well, that's not, exploring the breadth. If you have a put to the test an opinion, you should be able to also explain the opposing opinion with every bit as much accuracy, clarity, and so forth. And when someone is unwilling to explore the opposite opinion to show that they have given it thought, you really should probably discount their opinion as a result. Finally, logic. Does it all add up? It sounds like a tedious process, but again, as the video suggested, in our big brains, we should probably be able to manage 7 steps before coming to an opinion on our own, certainly when it's about something important. And I think you could apply these steps to virtually every decision. And perhaps then we would live in a world where there was room for the moderate, there was room for someone to have opposing opinions that don't fit into neat categories. Right now, I fear that is not the case. So I'm going to cheer for logic. I'm going to cheer for this 7-step process to critical thinking. Thank you.